John Bambrook, and I'm from Bowmoor Sailing Club in the Cotswolds.
Lovely, John. Thank you. Can you tell us a bit about your background, John? Didn't you used to be in the RAF?
Yeah, I did 22 years in the Air Force. I was commissioned into the RAF regiment. Lots of different tours and backgrounds and operations mostly through the 90s. And then I did a fair amount of training tours and staff tours, finishing up with a tour in the Ministry of Defence, strategic planning, strategic resources.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a lot of background for everybody about where you come from. So you're a member of Bowmoor, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Been there. I learned to sail there as a teenager, as a young apprentice, before I joined the Air Force in the 80s. And then when I left, we resettled back in and moved close, live in Farringdon in Oxfordshire, and Bowmoor was the local sailing club, and I joined there in 2012.
And you spent a bit of time as Commodore, I believe.
I did. I think they saw me come in with two young boys. So within my first year, I was coerced onto the committee as the youth manager, was my first appointment. And then 2015 to 2018, I was the club commodore, great privilege. And then I've been the training principal, the vice commodore, and currently sat in the rear commodore position looking after the sailing committee.
Brilliant. Now, I'm going to ask you about planning, because that's the reason we wanted to chat to you, John. With your background in the RAF and working at Bowmoor, tell us a bit about planning, why planning is important.
So planning, I guess, has been part of my life ever since I joined the Air Force. You know, I guess people would expect the stereotypical view of a military officer is that they do planning. And I guess to a certain extent that is true. I spent most of my life in one form or another, planning at the operational level, and then finishing at the end of my career in the Air Force, planning at the strategic level. And I guess we do it all the time. Most of us plan. We wouldn't necessarily write it down or talk of it as plans, but in everything we do in life, I guess we plan our way through things. We think about where we are. We think about where we want to go. We probably come up with a set of options in our mind. We choose the one we think is the best fit, and then we follow it. So I guess planning's been part of my life professionally for a long time. And it obviously is part when I was Commodore at the club, that was very much one of the things that one of the skills that we use lots in order to move the club into a different direction. I guess I've got, a view that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always had. And It's a good statement. There's another bit that will come on to that, but if you're happy with that, then there's no need to change. Most of us though want to improve, and I think if you want to improve something, you need to plan your way to being able to to be able to get to that position.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the 4 steps, the cycle in terms of planning, and the kind of, you start with a where are we now. In terms of Bowmoor, how did that look? How did that happen?
So in terms of trying to work out where you are now, I guess there are a number of things. There's probably more resources around now than there was when I first started in terms of things available through the RYA. But back then, I guess myself as an individual, you have your own needs when you're with an organisation. And for me, I was a family man. I had 2 young boys. I was wanting to spend my family time at the club. The club at the time was very much into its racing, but there wasn't necessarily the full social scene or the full family thing that went with that. So I felt, as a new member into the club, that actually the club could do a bit more on the family side of things to go along with its reputation for being a racing club.
Yeah.
There were also a number of other things. There were other people around me that felt the same way. People like to be like people. So when you join a club, you naturally gravitate to people that are like you. And so I was part of conversations, in the clubhouse, in and around the clubhouse as we did activities, and people were expressing similar views. So I started to pick up on the fact that I wasn't the only one that was feeling that actually the club could be more. It could be a better space. It could offer more. It's a great location for those of you that have been to Bowmoor, and it had, my predecessors gave us a fantastic platform to, from which to be able to make some changes. But it was the right time. I felt it was the right time for for things to move on. So there was other people views that I was able to pick up from around me. And although this is going to sound like you've paid me, the other thing was I attended a number of RYA workshops that were running in the Cotswold area at the time for the water park clubs. And they just stimulated some thinking, really. They were enough. They were enough. It was good to be able to meet with the other clubs, talk scenarios through with other clubs, listen to what best practice was and what was working elsewhere. And each one of those that I think I went to just reinforced the view that there were some areas that we could look to move to quite quickly, and some other areas that we probably needed to take a bit of a longer think about and try and look at resources to be able to get. So yeah, a combination of all of those factors, I think, was enabled me to establish the where are we now position, and to understand perhaps the gap between where I felt the club could get to and where we were at that particular time.
Gotcha. So how did you find out what your members wanted? You had an idea in your head, and you chatted to other members, and you had a bit of an idea of where the club might be. How did you find out from your other members?
It was discussions mostly, and I kind of touched on the point. It was, we didn't have a bar at the club. People would be sucking through their front teeth, but we didn't have a bar at the club. We had an amazing clubhouse, relatively new clubhouse that had been built, but without the bar, there wasn't that social space for after sailing. And actually, as we all know, it's the bit that we're missing at the moment, of course. But it's that post sport social where the good ideas club meet, and we come up with things, and to start with, those things can be fairly radical or seem a long way off, but then the more you talk them through, the more we began to realize, actually, no, we could do this, and we could be a bit bolder, and if only we could do this, and what if we had that. And so it really was, it was conversations with people that were like-minded, that were around the club, that you could see wanted a bit more from the environment. So that was really, those were the tools. That was, how we really worked on that. I guess since then there have been other things, the club satisfaction surveys and the various tools that the RYA have given us to establish membership views, which have also been helpful. A lot of those reinforced the points and the views that we had, but back when I started that, perhaps 2015, that was about the time that those tools were beginning to come online, I think. So we didn't have that to start with. So it really was talking to the members. That was probably the key thing.
So once you decided that we're going to make changes, we're going to do things, there has to then be some kind of structure to this, doesn't there? But how are we going to get there, if you like? There has to be some sort of structure.
Yeah, and there's another sort of, I guess, fairly classic quote, but it's quite a good one. Planning without resource is just dreaming. So the first thing, we'd Bowmoor, for those that know, had moved its lake, a few years before I arrived back at the club.
That sounds crazy. You got a new lake, didn't you? Didn't actually move your lake there.
we were leasehold on a water park lake that got sold off to some developers to build some very expensive second homes. But we were part of the deal was for us to move to an almost adjacent lake that was a little bit smaller, but in actual fact probably a better sailing area. And we were offered freehold. So we were given the lake and a bit of land around it in order for the developers. It was part of a deal, and of course I guess my predecessors thought about that for a very short period of time and accepted the very good offer. But we spent pretty much all of the club money at that time then, effectively making the move happen, building a new clubhouse, and we emptied the treasury in the process. We then spent the next, I guess, nearly 10 years building that money back up again, and And I guess there was a view that we really didn't spend a lot of money at that time. We spent what we needed to spend, but we were really trying to build the treasury back up again, the finances back up again. I think it probably got to the point before I took over, and it was certainly the case by the time I took over, we were sat on a fairly healthy sum of money, and there was money there that could be used, and there were resources by that stage that definitely needed improving. But there's quite often a view, and I've spoken to quite a few Commodores that have had the same view. We always worry about not having enough money, and what if the members don't join next year, and what if we have this, and I guess we're going through a crisis at the moment. With the coronavirus, and that was a big worry when that hit last year, and we were worried about the impact on our membership. Actually, we ended up with a waiting list because we had to close our membership list last year because we couldn't cope with the number of new people that wanted to come into the club. So I guess my point is that the thing about finance is if you've got enough resources there, then use those resources, because what actually happened was by spending the money, by spending quite a large sum of the money that we'd built back up again, we were able to dramatically improve our facilities. By improving the facilities, by improving the environment that we had, it became very, very easy to increase our membership numbers. And certainly, we've had some real success with membership numbers, over the last few years. During the 3 years that I was Commodore, we saw, a sustained year-on-year increase in membership, and that's followed through with my successor. He's been able to keep the same momentum going, and we've built our planning now on the fact that we've got increased membership. Increased membership brings increased funding, of course. So the cycle can go on. So resources is a really key. Identify what resources you've got. It doesn't just have to be finance. You've got volunteers, people. There's all sorts of things that can be resources. But identify what resources you've got to be able to make the changes that you need to be able to make, and then you can plan your options.
So that's people as a resource. Your volunteers using people's skills, people they might have in their workplace, and then they can bring to the club.
Members clubs have the full range. I mean, the beauty of a sailing club is you've got everything from professional people with professional qualifications and skill sets, everything from construction to planning to project management to IT to you name it, all the way through to practical skills, with builders and tradesmen and labourers and groundsmen and people that can help. And all of that experience is out there in your membership. And most people, in my experience, when you can paint the right vision, when you can create the right enthusiasm, then they're willing to get involved in projects that they're going to get the benefit of. They're club members, and we all get to benefit from improving the environment that we want to spend our time away from work. So convincing people to do that, I think, is again part of the key. It doesn't just have to be cash. Cash is always helpful, but if you've got good resources in the people that you've got, and you can identify that, and you can coerce them to help, then that's a great thing to be able to do as well.
Thank you. And what about reviewing it, John? How did you know when you were getting where you wanted to be and it was actually working your plans?
So that's another military thing. It's not exclusive to military, of course, but identifying what your measures of success are is also important. So when you set out on your plan, you're trying to achieve something, you kind of need to know what it is. You need an end state, so what it is that you're trying to achieve. Without an end state, it can just go on and on forever. To be fair, your end state can be a moving target to a certain degree. Maybe you could even say that you never achieve your end state, because if it's continuous improvement, you go on and on and on. But really, what we were seeking to do was to create an environment whereby the facilities were nicer, the environment was nicer, where people wanted to spend more of their time. And our view was that if we could achieve that, then our membership numbers would increase. And so we set some fairly bold targets for increasing our membership, which we smashed, I think, like I say, year on year. And of course, that suddenly then gave us more income. We explored diversity, and I think we've discussed diversity as a separate subject, but we looked at diversifying as well. And we at Bowmoor, as some of you may have heard, we introduced an open water swimming membership, and that was very popular, and it's given us a separate income stream as well, again, which all goes towards improving the overall financial position of the club and enabling us once again to be able to do more things to make the environment a nice place to be. Yeah, for us, I guess our target, if you like, was increasing membership, but also increasing people's enjoyment of the club. So you know, we didn't really have much in the way of social calendar. We'd tried in the past, but things hadn't really got off the ground. And you know, perhaps not rocket salad, without a bar, it was difficult to have that focal point. And the second we put a bar in, a proper bar, a really good one, it provided a social focus to the club to be able to hold events. And that changed the club quite significantly in quite a short period of time. Yeah, and then of course we then came into the time at which those RYA member satisfaction surveys came around, and when you then started seeing the feedback from those surveys, and the key words, you know, being played back like family friendly club, you know, sociable environment, great place to spend time. When you started getting those phrases, you know, from members played back to you, you realised that that was what we were trying to achieve. It's the path that we set out on. We've now got the membership telling us that this is what Bowmoor is, which is where what we'd set out to achieve. Okay.
Lovely. Can I pick your brains about being a Commodore? Advice for other Commodores. We've talked through the cycle. What happens? You know, where are we now? What are we going to do? Where do we want to be? How do we measure that? Have you got some advice for other Commodores about this? Things you've learned.
Yeah, it is. You can't please all the people all the time. That's for sure. You know, it's a job where I think you have to. It's a people job. It's a leadership job. It's a management responsibility. You get involved in everything. I would say first and foremost, it's a front of house job as well. So the Commodore's role is to be the smiley person that's friendly, that greets people. That engages with people. You know, you're looking to inspire people, motivate people, because if you can do those things, people will be attracted to wanting to contribute towards what you're trying to achieve. Having a good governance structure, trying not to do everything yourself. I mean, I've talked to some colleagues where, and in fact, my predecessor won't mind me saying, he'd been in the job for some time, and he'd got to the point where he was pretty much running everything. You know, he had the time, so people let him do it. So he ended up doing more and more and more and more. I was working full time, so I had to accept the fact that I couldn't do what my predecessor did. So one of the first things we did was actually to restructure the committees, so that we gave some budgets to the various subcommittees. We let them do their planning for their particular areas, and then as the Commodore, I ran the executive committee and overseeing the sort of slightly more strategic roles and direction of the club, but then let my sailing committee get on with the sailing programme. The vice Commodore, who was estates, get on with the priorities of improving our estate. Training principal got on and ran with the training committee, and so on. And so we changed the committee structure to devolve some of the power down to be able to do that. And one of the ways that we did that was to introduce a 5-year financial plan. So, we wanted to look, we recognized you can't always afford to do all the things you want to try and achieve straight away. So we took it over a 5-year period, and we worked out what we could reasonably afford to do in each of the next 5 years, looking at a series of priorities that we'd come up with. And then we allocated the resources to those, and then actually let the committees get on and deliver those projects, reporting back to the executive committee, on their progress. And I think that looking back was a good way of doing things. But it's always a challenge. It needs to run a structure like that. You need enough volunteers, and this is where, you know, Commodores, hopefully being people persons, ideally, you know, need the ability to coerce people, you know, onto those various committees, so that you can benefit from, you know, the wide range of skills that are out there in the membership.
Yeah, we certainly see that. The more people you've got involved, the job is less onerous. People are happy to do smaller jobs. They don't want a big, massive job. Yeah, lots of people doing small jobs.
At least suck them in with the small ones to start with.
Did anything go wrong, John? Did anything you did that you wouldn't do again, or that did anything not quite go according to plan?
Yeah, again, I sort of you can't please all the people all the time. I can't think, you know, we were fortunate that we did have a good group. So I'm just trying to think back. There's nothing specific, I don't think. No, I can't, Leon. I can't think of anything specific that went. That's not to say that we got everything right. That you couldn't say. I can't think of something specific that went badly wrong. And to be honest with you, if things do start to go wrong, you don't, as we all know, you don't learn anything by getting things right all the time. And, you know, you learn by trying something, failing, and then trying again and getting it better. So, so I think, you know, there were some projects that we probably spent more money on than we may have needed to have done so, but we did get to where we wanted to go. You know, maybe we could have delivered a couple of the big projects slightly cheaper, saved some money, and delivered a bit more. But in our haste to do things, we may have spent a little bit more money than we may have needed. That's perhaps one of the examples that I can think of. But we achieved that goal. You know, it delivered the effect that we were after. Our membership numbers increased, and we certainly paid back the cash that we spent on the project. So, you know, again, don't be hung up by the fact that you've got sort of fairly bold plans. If they come off, then, you know, the positives and the rewards can be there.
Finally, John, you've been very positive about Bowmoor. Is Bowmoor what you thought it would be when you came in? Is it? Are you there, or are you getting there? Is it what you wanted?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not at the moment, of course. You know, coronavirus is, you know, sailing clubs are, and all the work we'd put into the club was to bring people closely together. You know, we wanted families to come together. We wanted social events to bring people together. We wanted to run more, you know, sailing open events. We wanted to have more camping at the club. We wanted people to spend more time there. And of course, right now, all of the initiatives are to push people apart. And it's been a really difficult year, really challenging year. And I suspect most clubs will have had the same challenges.
Sure.
That's been difficult. So I would say, you know, we've stepped back, not because we want to, or because we have designed stepping back from where we want to be, but it's been forced on us by events this year. But absolutely, as soon as we're able, and let's keep our fingers crossed for the right things to happen next year, we know what we want to get back. We want to get back, you know, one of the things this year, you know, we held off doing any level 1-2 courses for children and for adults. Well, that is the lifeblood of your future part of your club. If you're not bringing young people in at the bottom end, and you're not attracting families in, then you're cutting your legs off for the future, I would suggest. So we recognise this year we've not been able to do that. You know, doing ab initio training and having that close contact that you have as instructors with dragging people into power boats and out of water when they capsize. We've not been able to do that as a club. We absolutely want to get back to that. So next year, as soon as the freedoms allow us to do so, we will want to put our foot on the gas pedal hard in terms of social events, events that bring people together again, and our training program, so that we can make sure we're setting ourselves up for the future.
That's brilliant. Thank you, John.
You're very welcome.